survive, you earn your freedom.
Hey guys, what's going on? I'm the Tchenovstok and welcome back to Tchenovstok. In this episode, guys, we are of course building a GULAG. This was actually quite a popular request from you guys. I mean, in pretty much every episode, there's at least one person requesting to build a GULAG, so I thought I would go ahead and do that. One thing though, I'll be honest, before even starting this entire series, I wasn't really sure what a GULAG was in the first place, and I never realized how big of an element of, I guess, the Soviet society the GULAG system was. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, well, I mean, I guess you're a little bit more familiar with it now since I included that little description there in the starting cinematics. But basically, it was just a system of forced labor camps for prisoners. And I guess from my research, whether you were just a criminal for stealing from a store or a political prisoner, you most likely would have ended up in a GULAG and served a very harsh sentence. So from what I understand, the conditions within a GULAG were very, very poor, both like hygienic, food rations were scarce. Like it was a pretty terrible time to be in a GULAG. You did not want to be in a GULAG at that period in time. So I mean, yeah, so after seeing a bunch of requests to build a GULAG, I thought, okay, let's go ahead and do that. But I didn't realize that the GULAG system was almost non-existent in 1979, which is what this city is based on. Apparently the GULAG system was completely dissolved by the 1960s, and from what I gathered, they reached their peak in, I think, the mid-40s. Shortly after World War II or during World War II, at one point there were like, I think almost 20 million, or maybe even more, was it 30 million prisoners in the entire GULAG system. And the GULAG system, by the way, is not like one particular place. It's a collection of prisons all across the Soviet Union. I forget how many there are, but there were a ton of them, like across the whole state. So it was a pretty big operation at the time. So that's when I decided, all right, I'm gonna build a GULAG anyways, but I'm gonna make an abandoned one. And I've always kind of wanted to explore building some sort of abandoned city or some sort of dilapidated building of some sorts. It's never really something that I've gotten myself into, but this was a really fun experiment to sort of play around with that. You'll see as this episode progresses just how dilapidated this entire area has become. There'll be like grass growing up through the pavement. The pavement's going to be all broken. Buildings will be surrounded by overgrown trees and bushes. So, I mean, you've seen in the starting preview that this area has seen better days. So, I mean, that's basically the whole principle of this thing. I had to build a GULAG. But at this period in time in the Soviet history, they were kind of a thing of the past. So that's where the abandoned theme came to be. And as far as like how GULAGs looked, I'm not entirely sure if there was like a standard layout that most of them were built in. I'm not really sure how they even looked in the first place. I had trouble finding like some good pictures of what a GULAG looked like. So I just kind of based it off of like some sort of like prisoner camp, just like a general kind of shape. It's a forced labor camp is what it is. So the prisoners would be forced to work for the benefit of the Soviet Union. So that would be either mining coal, or maybe the camp would be close to like a lumber mill or something. So at least like the prisoners were forced to do something productive for the state. So that's why in this GULAG, I'm going to include a couple of warehouses. Not entirely sure what those warehouses would be for, but, I guess we could say that it's some sort of manufacturing plant where maybe the prisoners would make some parts for the Russian military or something like that, or I don't know. I'll leave that up to your guys' imagination. But for the most part, this GULAG is just going to be like a fort it's almost going to look like a military base, honestly, and I'm going to use mostly military buildings. You can see these barracks is here. These are from the military pack that I used near the Air Force Base. They're the exact same buildings. So, I mean, it could almost pass as an abandoned military base if this wasn't really advertised as being a gulag. So the basic layout that I'm going for with this build is in the central part of the gulag is where all the barracks are going to be, which house the workers. And on the extremities of the build, I'm going to place down a bunch of factories and warehouses, as well as some administration buildings like you're seeing right now. And I guess the reason for that, I was thinking it would reduce the chances of having some escapees. I mean, the whole building is surrounded by this huge concrete wall with guard towers in each corner, so I would assume that the chance of escape is quite slim. But I think it just makes sense to have like the warehouses and things on the extremities. And you'll see a little bit later on, like this big warehouse, for example, I place it along the wall. So like half the building is outside of the camp, the other half is inside. So that way there's, you know, the products that are being made in the factory can make their way out of the camp. And of course, like I would assume in these types of situations, there's probably tons of guards around, there's probably tons of security, just making sure that everybody's doing their job. But I can only imagine how terrible this must have been back in the day to be like working. I think it was, they had to work more than a week straight before having one day off, and it was like 12-hour days, probably no comfort at all, like no air condition, working in like super hot factories. I mean, the conditions were very, very poor from what I'm reading, and it was certainly not a fun place to be. And I made sure that the camp was located in a super remote area. It's kind of on a peninsula surrounded by mountains, and the main road going out of the camp has to go over a bridge. And, you know, so even if somebody were to escape, it would be quite challenging to navigate the woods and everything to get back to civilization. I mean, I think, like, I don't know how far the camp would be in terms of, like, kilometers from the main city, but it's a good walk if you want to get back to the city. And I mean, you know, Tchenovstok is like super remote in the first place. Like the city is just in the middle of nowhere, so your chances of survival and escaping are quite low. So for the first part of this episode, we placed down the infrastructure for the camp. Then we're going to move on in just a second here to start placing down some decals and trees and, you know, little details and stuff. But this is where the camp is really going to start to look like an abandoned camp. And honestly, like, this was not really a challenging build by any means. I had to be a little bit creative with, you know, what kind of decals and things I placed down, but I'm so used to it at this point that it just kind of came naturally. And I mean, honestly, this was such a fun build. I don't know, everything was just going, I just had a ton of fun doing this. So away we go with the detailing. I'll let you guys enjoy a few minutes of some precise detailing. And then a little bit later on, we'll get into some more cinematics at the very end of this episode. really hope you guys like the dark theme of this episode. I feel like I went a little more dark and gloomy than I normally do, but I really wanted to capture the feeling of this build, you know, with it being such so badly in disrepair, and you know, just the history of the Gulag system. I mean, it's a pretty dark story to begin with, and honestly I was going for like a Chernobyl kind of vibe with this episode. If you guys have watched the HBO docuseries on Chernobyl, the music in that series was pretty similar to what I placed in this episode, and you know, it's a little detail that I put in there. But yeah, I mean, the camp is shaping up pretty nicely at this point, so much so that my game is actually lagging quite a bit when I'm viewing this particular spot in the map, just because of the sheer amount of details and props and things that I place down. I mean, the prop density is pretty high in this build. But I mean, like I said, guys, all in all, I really enjoyed building this. I'm glad that a lot of you have requested that I build a Gulag, because otherwise I would have not really put so much of an importance on it, and I might not have built one at all. So thanks, guys, for the support on that. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up right about now. So I really thank you guys so much for watching this episode. As usual, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for many more videos like these to come out. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support the channel even further. So I thank you guys so much for watching, and until the next episode, take care, guys.